The stars looked different here. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the U.E.'s Retribution and watched the alien sun grow larger on the main screen. This was enemy space now. This was where the Zephyrian Empire had ruled for 300 years. Jake was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had seen too many wars. He had lost too many friends. But this mission was different. This time, humanity was not fighting for land or resources. They were fighting for justice. "Captain, we are now entering the outer system," said Commander Lisa Parker from her station. She was young for her rank, only 32, but she was the best tactical officer in the human fleet. Her fingers moved quickly over the control panels. As she studied the enemy positions, Jake nodded. "Good. What do our sensors show?" Lisa looked at her screens. The data was not good news. 12 orbital defense platforms around the main planet. Each one has enough firepower to destroy a regular battleship. There are also 67 warships in the system. Most of them are cruiser class or bigger. The bridge was quiet for a moment. Everyone knew the numbers were bad. The Zephyrians had ruled this part of space for so long because they had more ships and better shields than anyone else. They used their power to make slaves of weaker species. 17 different alien races served the Zephyrian Empire against their will. "Sir, incoming message from Earth Command," said Communications Officer Ben Roberts. He was a quiet man who rarely spoke unless he had to. His job was to keep the ship connected to human space, which was very far away. "Put Admiral Sullivan on screen," Jake ordered. The main display changed to show Admiral Kate Sullivan sitting in her office on Earth. She was an older woman with white hair and sharp blue eyes. She had been fighting alien empires for longer than most people had been alive. "Captain Morrison, are you ready to begin the operation?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. The ship is at full combat readiness. All systems are working perfectly." Admiral Sullivan looked serious. "Jake, I want you to understand something. The Galactic Council has done nothing to help the slave species for decades. They make speeches and pass resolutions, but they never act. That leaves us as the only ones willing to fight for what is right." Jake understood. Humanity was still new to the galaxy. They had only been traveling between the stars for 50 years. Most alien species saw them as primitive and weak. They did not know about human determination. They did not know about human anger when faced with injustice. "The rules are simple, Captain," Admiral Sullivan continued. "Free the enslaved species by any means necessary. Show no mercy to those who profit from slavery. The galaxy needs to learn that some crimes cannot be forgiven." "Understood, Admiral. We will not let you down." The transmission ended, and Jake turned to face his crew. These men and women had volunteered for the most dangerous mission in human history. They knew they might not come home, but they also knew that millions of innocent beings were counting on them. Chief Engineer Amy Collins spoke up from her station. "Captain, the quantum disruptor arrays are fully charged and ready. The new weapons are working exactly like the tests showed." Amy was brilliant. She had helped design the Retribution's most secret weapons. The quantum disruptors could phase through normal energy shields like they were not there. No other species in the galaxy had this technology. It was humanity's greatest advantage. "Excellent work, Amy. How long can we stay hidden from their sensors?" "The stealth system should keep us invisible for at least 6 hours, maybe longer. The Zephyrians have never seen cloaking technology like ours." Intelligence Officer Ryan Brooks cleared his throat. He was a small man who knew more about alien military tactics than anyone else in the human fleet. "Captain, I have updated information about the enemy fleet positions. Their main battle group is stationed near the 4th planet. Admiral Vexstar is commanding from the flagship Dominator." Jake studied the tactical display. The Zephyrian fleet was spread out across the system, but they were not expecting an attack. Why would they? No one had challenged their power in over a century. They thought they were safe in their own space. What about the slave populations? Jake asked. Ryan pulled up another screen. Intelligence suggests there are slave camps on 7 different planets in this system. The largest concentration is on the main world, where about 4 million beings from different species are being held. Lisa looked up from her station. Captain, we could free all of them if we take out the defense platforms first. Once those are gone, the orbital control centers will be defenseless. Jake thought about the plan. It was risky, but all good plans were risky. The Retribution was just one ship against an entire empire. But it was not just any ship. It was the most advanced warship humanity had ever built. It carried weapons that could destroy anything the Zephyrians had. It had armor that could absorb energy attacks that would vaporize other vessels. Dr. Carl Thompson, how is the crew holding up? Jake asked the ship's medical officer. Dr. Thompson was monitoring stress levels and physical health of all crew members. Everyone is ready, Captain. Morale is high. The crew knows what we are fighting for. Jake looked around the bridge one more time. These people trusted him to make the right decisions. They trusted him to bring justice to this dark corner of the galaxy. He would not disappoint them. All right, people, this is it. We have traveled further from Earth than any human ship has ever gone. We are here to end an empire that has caused suffering for 3 centuries. We are here to prove that humanity will not stand by while innocents suffer. The crew straightened in their seats. Every person on the bridge felt the weight of the moment. Lisa, prepare the quantum disruptors for first strike. Amy, make sure all systems are at maximum efficiency. Ben, monitor all Zephyrian communications. I want to know the moment they discover we are here. Jake walked to his command chair and sat down. Outside the main screen, the enemy star system waited. Somewhere out there, millions of enslaved beings hoped for freedom they had never known. Today, humanity would give them that freedom. Take us in, Jake ordered. Silent approach. Let us show these tyrants what happens when they make enemies of the human race. The UES Retribution moved forward through space like a ghost. Its stealth. Systems hid it from enemy sensors. Its crew prepared for the battle that would change the galaxy forever. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled through fear and cruelty for centuries. That rule was about to end. The attack began when the Zephyrian homeworld sun rose over the main continent. Captain Jake Morrison watched the enemy defense platforms on his tactical screen. Each platform was the size of a small city and armed with enough weapons to level mountains. All quantum disruptor arrays are locked on target, reported Commander Lisa Parker. Her voice was calm and professional, but Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. This was the moment they had trained for. This was when they would find out if human technology was really superior to the aliens who had ruled the galaxy for centuries. Fire, Jake ordered. The Retribution's main weapons activated with barely a sound. 12 beams of pure energy shot out from the human warship. The beams looked like blue lightning as they crossed the empty space between the ship and the orbital platforms. The Zephyrian shields were the best in the galaxy. They had stopped every attack for 300 years. Energy beams should have bounced off them like rain on a window. Instead, the quantum disruptors passed through the shields as if they were not there at all. 12 orbital defense platforms exploded at the same moment. Each explosion was like a small sun being born and dying in seconds. The light was so bright that the crew had to look away from the main screen. Direct hits on all targets, Lisa reported. Her voice showed the amazement she felt. The quantum disruptors worked perfectly. The platforms are completely destroyed. Across the Zephyrian fleet, alarm signals began screaming. Admiral Vextar was a veteran commander who had never lost a battle. He had destroyed rebel fleets and conquered star systems, but he had never seen weapons that could ignore shields completely. "What just happened?" Vextar shouted at his bridge crew. "How did they destroy our platforms?" His tactical officer, a young Zephyrian named Kexener, stared at his instruments. "Admiral, I am reading massive explosions, but I cannot detect the enemy ship. Our sensors show nothing. That is impossible. Something destroyed 12 defense platforms at the same time. Find that ship." But the retribution remained invisible to Zephyrian technology. The human stealth systems were beyond anything the aliens had ever encountered. They could see the weapons fire, but they could not see the ship that was firing. On the human ridge, Communications Officer Ben Roberts was listening to enemy transmissions. "Captain, they are completely confused. They know they are under attack, but they cannot find us." Jake felt a moment of satisfaction. The Zephyrians had made their empire by being stronger than everyone else. They had never faced an enemy they could not see or weapons they could not stop. "Lisa, target their command ship. Let us introduce Admiral Vextar to human justice." The Retribution's weapons turned toward the massive Zephyrian flagship. The Dominator was 3 times larger than the human ship and carried enough firepower to glass an entire planet. It was the symbol of Zephyrian power in this part of the galaxy. More quantum disruptor beams reached out from the invisible human ship. They struck the Dominator's shields and passed through without slowing down. The beams hit the flagship's engine section and weapon base. Explosions ran along the huge vessel's hull like a chain of firecrackers. Admiral Vextar felt his ship shake under the attack. "Damage report," he yelled. "Main engines offline. Weapons systems failing. We are losing life support on decks 7 through 12. His damage control officer reported. "How can this be happening? Our shields are still up." "Sir, the enemy weapons are somehow bypassing our shields completely." "I have never seen anything like it." Captain Nina Walsh was leading the Retribution's fighter squadrons in their first combat mission. She was a pilot who had never lost a dogfight and had trained for this moment her entire career. Her stealth bombers were as invisible as the main ship. "Gold Squadron, this is Nina. We are going after the communication relays. Silver Squadron, target the remaining command ships. Let us make sure no one escapes to warn other systems." 24 human fighters spread out across the Zephyrian fleet. They were small compared to the massive alien warships, but they carried weapons that could punch through any armor. The pilots had trained for years to fight enemies who outnumbered them 100 to 1. The first bomber reached a Zephyrian cruiser and fired 2 missiles. The missiles were designed to penetrate shields and explode inside the target ship. The cruiser's bridge disappeared in a ball of fire, taking the captain and all his senior officers with it. "Direct hit on the cruiser Revenge," Nina reported, moving to next target. Across the battle zone, more Zephyrian ships were dying. They tried to return fire, but they were shooting at enemies they could not see. Their weapons fired wildly into empty space, while human fighters picked them off one by one. Chief Engineer Amy Collins was monitoring the Retribution's power systems from her station deep in the ship. The quantum disruptors used enormous amounts of energy, but the human reactors were keeping up with the demand. "Captain, all weapon systems are operating at maximum efficiency," she reported. "We can maintain this rate of fire for another 4 hours without any problems." Dr. Carl Thompson was watching the crew's vital signs on his medical monitors. Combat was stressful, but his people were handling it well. Their training and determination were keeping them focused on the mission. "Crew performance is excellent, Captain," he said. "No signs of combat fatigue or stress reactions." The battle continued for 6 hours. One by one, Zephyrian ships tried to escape the system, and one by one, human weapons destroyed them. Admiral Vextar watched his fleet disappear from his tactical screens. "Sir, we have lost 60% of our ships," his tactical officer reported. "The remainder are requesting permission to surrender." Vextar had never surrendered in his life. He had conquered worlds and enslaved entire species. The thought of giving up to an enemy he could not even see was almost too much to bear. "Send a message to the enemy ship," he ordered. "Tell them we are willing to discuss terms." Ben Roberts received the transmission and reported it to Captain Morrison. "Sir, the enemy admiral wants to surrender." Jake looked at the tactical display. The Zephyrian fleet was broken and scattered. Most of their ships were destroyed, and the survivors were damaged and running low on fuel. But his orders were clear. "Tell Admiral Vextar that slavers do not get to surrender," Jake said. "Tell him that justice has no mercy for those who profit from the suffering of innocents." The Retribution's weapons fired again. This time, the target was the Dominator itself. The quantum disruptors tore through the flagship's hull like it was made of paper. Admiral Vextar had just enough time to realize that his empire was ending before the bridge exploded around him. When the battle was over, debris from 67 Zephyrian warships floated in space around the homeworld. Not a single enemy vessel had escaped. The defense platforms were gone. The orbital command centers were silent. On the planet below, 4 million enslaved beings looked up at the sky and saw explosions where their master ships used to be. They did not know who had freed them, but they knew their long nightmare was finally over. Jake stood on his bridge and watched the destruction on the main screen. The Zephyrian Empire had seemed unstoppable just hours before. Now their home fleet was gone, and their capital world was defenseless. "Ben, send a message to all the slave camps on the planet," Jake ordered. "Tell them they are free. Tell them that humanity will not allow their suffering to continue." The message went out in 17 different languages to 17 different species. For the first time in centuries, beings who had been born into slavery heard the word that they had never dared to hope for. Freedom. The U.S. Retribution had won its first battle against the Zephyrian Empire. But Jake knew this was only the beginning. There were dozens of star systems still under Zephyrian control. There were millions more enslaved beings waiting for liberation. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when tyrants made enemies of the human race. News of the destruction at the Zephyrian homeworld spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. Captain Jake Morrison stood in his ready room, reading reports from human intelligence networks. The reaction from other Zephyrian worlds was exactly what he had hoped for. Fear. "Captain, we are receiving surrender offers from 7 different star systems," reported Communications Officer Ben Roberts. "Most of them are offering to free their slave populations if we promise not to attack." Jake walked to his window and looked out at the stars. 3 weeks had passed since the battle at the homeworld. In that time, the U.S. Retribution had visited 12 Zephyrian military bases and turned them into scrap metal. Each victory made the next one easier as enemy. Morale collapsed. "What about the fortress worlds?" Jake asked. "Are they still planning to resist?" Ryan Brooks, the intelligence officer, pulled up a star map on the main screen. "Sir, there are still 5 major strongholds that refuse to surrender. The most important is Kepler Prime. That is where the Zephyrian military headquarters is located." Jake studied the map. Kepler Prime was deep in enemy space, surrounded by defensive positions and early warning systems. It was designed to be impossible to attack. The Zephyrians had built it after their last major war 200 years ago. "How many ships are defending it?" Jake asked. "Intelligence estimates about 40 warships, plus orbital weapons and ground-based defenses. But, sir, there is something else. We have been receiving messages from resistance groups on the planets we have not attacked yet. Ryan changed the display to show intercepted communications. The messages were in different alien languages, but the computer had translated them into English. The enslaved populations are rising up on their own, Ryan continued. They are sabotaging Zephyrian equipment and attacking guard posts. Some of them are asking for human weapons in support. Dr. Helen King, the science officer, had been studying the social effects of the human campaign. She was a quiet woman who understood alien cultures better than most diplomats. Captain, what we are seeing is the complete breakdown of the Zephyrian control system, she explained. Their empire was based on fear and superior technology. We have proven that their technology is not superior, and that has destroyed the fear that kept their slaves in line. Jake nodded. This was what he had hoped would happen. The Zephyrians had ruled for centuries because no one believed they could be defeated. Once that belief was shattered, their entire system would collapse. Commander Lisa Parker entered the ready room with a tactical report. Sir, we have completed our analysis of the Kepler Prime defenses. The fortress is strong, but it has weaknesses we can exploit. She activated a holographic display showing the fortress world. Kepler Prime was covered with weapon installations and shield generators. Underground bunkers, connected by tunnels, held millions of tons of supplies and ammunition. The main weakness is their communication system, Lisa explained. All their defenses are coordinated from a central command bunker. If we can take out that bunker, the rest of their defenses will be unable to work together effectively. Chief Engineer Amy Collins had been working on new weapons modifications. Captain, I think I have a solution. We can modify the quantum disruptors to create a focused beam that will penetrate through solid rock. We should be able to target the command bunker, even if it is buried a mile underground. Jake looked at his senior staff. These people had become more than just officers under his command. They were his partners in bringing justice to a galaxy that had forgotten what freedom meant. How long will it take to make the modifications? He asked Amy. 2 days, maybe 3. But, sir, there is something else we should consider. Colonel Frank Adams has been training a Marine assault team for ground operations. If we can get them onto the surface, they might be able to capture enemy leaders alive. Colonel Adams was the toughest Marine in the human fleet. He had volunteered for the most dangerous missions and always brought his people home alive. His powered armor suits and plasma weapons were as advanced as the ship's quantum disruptors. What is your recommendation, Colonel? Jake asked when Adams joined the meeting. Frank Adams was a big man with scars from a dozen battles. Sir, if we can breach their orbital defenses, I can take a team down to the surface. The fortress may be strong, but it was designed to fight. Off ships, not infantry with modern equipment. My Marines can be inside their command bunker in 6 hours. The plan was risky, but Jake had learned to trust his people's expertise. Very well, we will combine both approaches. Amy, start working on the disruptor modifications. Frank, prepare your assault team. Lisa, I want detailed targeting solutions for the orbital defenses. 3 days later, the U.E. Retribution dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler Prime system. This time, the enemy was ready for them. The Fortress World's defenders had studied reports from previous battles and developed new tactics. Captain, they are using wide-spectrum sensor sweeps to try to detect us, reported N. Roberts. They know about our stealth systems now. Jake was not surprised. The Zephyrians were not stupid. They had learned from their defeats and adapted their strategies. But adaptation worked both ways. Good, Jake said. Let them waste power on sensors that cannot find us. Lisa, are the new targeting systems ready? Yes, sir. We can now target individual buildings from orbit with perfect accuracy. The modified disruptor should be able to reach the command bunker no matter how deep it is buried. The battle for Kepler Prime began differently from previous engagements. This time, the Zephyrians tried to fill space with weapon fire, hoping to hit the invisible human ship by accident. Thousands of energy beams and missiles flew through the void, creating a deadly light show. The Retribution moved through the defensive. Fire like a ghost. Its advanced hull could absorb direct hits from enemy weapons, and its stealth systems made targeting almost impossible. The human ship fired back with surgical precision, destroying enemy vessels one at a time. "Sir, enemy. Flagship is hailing us," Ben reported. "It is General Zektar, the fortress commander." "Put him on screen," Jake ordered. The main display showed a Zephyrian military officer in an elaborate uniform. General Zektar was older than Admiral Vextar had been, with scars that showed decades of combat experience. "Human Captain, I am General Zektar of the Kepler Prime Garrison. I wish to discuss terms of surrender." Jake studied the alien general. Unlike previous Zephyrian commanders, this one did not seem surprised or panicked. He looked like a professional soldier who understood that he was facing a superior enemy. "General, there are no terms. Your empire enslaved innocent beings for 3 centuries. The only justice is complete destruction of your military capability. I understand your position, Captain, but I have civilian populations on this world. Non-combatants who have done nothing wrong. Surely your famous human morality includes mercy for innocents?" It was a clever argument, and Jake had to admit the general had a point. But his orders were clear, and millions of enslaved beings were counting on him to not show weakness. "General, release all enslaved populations in this system immediately. Allow them to leave on their own ships. Do this, and I will limit my attack to military targets only." General Zektar was quiet for a moment. "Very well, Captain. I will order the immediate release of all slave populations. In return, I ask that you allow military personnel who surrender to be treated as prisoners of war rather than war criminals." Jake looked at his senior officers. Lisa nodded slightly. The offer was reasonable, and it would save lives on both sides. "Agreed, General. You have 2 hours to begin releasing the slaves. After that, I will assume you are stalling and resume the attack." The transmission ended, and Jake turned to his crew. "Frank, get your Marines ready. I do not trust that general completely. If this is a trick, we need to be prepared to take the fortress by force." For the next hour, ships began leaving Kepler Prime. Most were small transports carrying freed slaves to safety. But Jake's sensors also detected military vessels trying to escape the system. "Sir, several enemy warships are attempting to flee," Lisa reported. "Should we intercept them?" Jake thought for a moment. His mission was to destroy the Zephyrian military capability, not to be merciful to those who tried to run away. "Negative. Let them go. Word of what happened here will spread faster if there are survivors to tell the story." But not all the Zephyrian ships were trying to escape. Some were positioning themselves for a surprise attack. General Zektar had been buying time to prepare one final desperate assault. "Captain, sensors are detecting weapon charges building up across the fortress defenses," Ryan Brooks warned. "I think they are planning to attack us when we lower our guard." Jake was not surprised. The general had seemed too cooperative for a Zephyrian military officer. "Lisa, target all orbital weapons platforms." "Amy, are the modified disruptors ready?" "Ready and fully charged, Captain," Amy Collins reported from engineering. "Fire all weapons. Show them what happens when they try to trick the human race." The Retribution's attack was devastating. The modified quantum disruptors punched through the fortress world's crust like it was soft dirt. Underground bunkers that had been built to survive asteroid impacts were vaporized in seconds. Colonel Adams and his Marines landed on the surface while the orbital battle continued. The news of the Zephyrian Empire's complete collapse reached every corner of the galaxy within weeks. Captain Jake Morrison sat in the conference room aboard the UE's Retribution, watching reports from news networks across dozens of different species. Some praised humanity's actions as liberation. Others called it conquest. But everyone agreed on one thing. The galaxy had changed forever. Ambassador Claire Davis appeared on the main screen from the Galactic Council headquarters on Nexus Station. She was humanity's chief diplomat, a woman who had spent her career trying to solve problems with words instead of weapons. Captain Morrison, the Council is in complete chaos, she reported. Half the members want to declare humanity a threat to galactic peace. The other half want to hire you to solve their own problems with local tyrants. Jake was not surprised. Politicians were the same everywhere, whether they were human or alien. They wanted the benefits of justice without the responsibility of fighting for it. What is Earth's official position? Jake asked. President Wilson has authorized you to continue operations against any empire that practices slavery or commits crimes against sentient beings. The Council can debate all they want, but Earth will not apologize for freeing innocent people. Dr. Helen King had been studying the political situation across the galaxy. Captain, we are seeing rebellions breaking out in at least 15 different star systems. The hegemony of Krath and the Syndicate of Vel are both dealing with major uprisings among their enslaved populations. That was exactly what Jake had hoped would happen. Fear of human intervention was causing oppressive governments to collapse from within. Enslaved beings who had never dared to resist were now fighting for their freedom. Intelligence Officer Ryan Brooks pulled up a tactical display. Sir, our spy networks are reporting that the Krathians and the Vel Syndicate have formed a military alliance. They are pooling their fleets to present a united front against human expansion. Jake studied the star map. The hegemony of Krath controlled 43 star systems in the galactic south. The Syndicate of Vel dominated trade routes in the eastern spiral arm. Together, they had over 200 warships and commanded the loyalty of dozens of smaller species. How does their combined fleet compare to what we faced with the Zephyrians? Jake asked. Commander Lisa Parker had been analyzing enemy capabilities. Sir, they have superior numbers, but their technology is similar to what we have already defeated. The main difference is that they have had time to study our tactics and develop countermeasures. Chief Engineer Amy Collins entered the conference room with a data pad full of technical specifications. Captain, I have good news and bad news. The good news is that our quantum disruptors are still more advanced than anything the enemy has. The bad news is that they are using new shield frequencies that might reduce our weapons' effectiveness. Jake nodded. The enemy was learning and adapting, just as he would expect from competent military leaders. But humanity was also learning and adapting. Amy, how long would it take to modify our weapons to deal with the new shields? 2 weeks, maybe 3. But sir, there is another option. The freed Zephyrian worlds have been asking to join our fleet. Some of their former slaves are excellent engineers and pilots. They could help us build new ships using human technology. That was an interesting possibility. Jake had been thinking about the long-term implications of humanity's role as galactic liberators. One ship, no matter how advanced, could not police the entire galaxy. What kind of ships are they offering? Jake asked. Commander Steve Martinez, who had been promoted after the battle at Kepler Prime, pulled up construction blueprints. Sir, they want to build frigates and destroyers using our quantum disruptor technology. The ships would be smaller and less powerful than the Retribution, but they could handle patrol duties and support operations. The idea of an allied fleet was appealing, but Jake had concerns about sharing human military technology with alien species, even freed ones. Ryan, What do we know about the loyalty of these former slaves? Can we trust them with our most advanced weapons? Ryan had been conducting background investigations on potential allies. Sir, most of the volunteers have personal reasons for wanting to fight against the remaining slave empires. They lost family members to Zephyrian brutality, or they were tortured in prison camps. Their hatred of tyranny seems genuine. Dr. Carl Thompson had been monitoring the psychological profiles of the freed alien populations. Captain, in my medical opinion, these beings are experiencing what humans would call a liberation syndrome. They want to prove they are worthy of freedom by helping to free others. It is a healthy psychological response to trauma. Jake made his decision. Very well. We will accept volunteers from the freed worlds, but only after thorough screening. Amy, work with their engineers to design ships that can use our technology. Steve, start training programs for alien crews. 2 months later, the UES Retribution led a small fleet toward the border between Krathian and Vel Syndicate space. 3 frigates and 2 destroyers followed the human flagship, each one crewed by former slaves who had volunteered to fight for galactic freedom. Captain Nina Walsh commanded one of the new destroyers, the FSS Liberation. Her crew included humans and aliens working together for the first time in galactic history. The ship's quantum disruptors were smaller than the Retributions, but still powerful enough to defeat any known shield technology. Captain Morrison, this is Nina, she reported. Over the fleet communication system. All ships are ready for combat operations. Crew morale is excellent. Jake was proud of how quickly the mixed crews had learned to work together. Humans and aliens had different ways of thinking and communicating, but they shared a common hatred of tyranny. Excellent work, Nina. Ryan, what are our spy networks reporting about enemy positions? Ryan had been coordinating with resistance groups across Krathian and Vel space. Sir, the enemy alliance has concentrated their main fleet at the Nexus Gate system. It is a strategic choke point that controls access to both empires. Intelligence. Estimates over 150 warships. The numbers were intimidating, but Jake had faced bad odds before. The key was to use superior technology and tactics to overcome numerical disadvantages. Lisa, analyze the Nexus Gate system. I want to know every defensive position and every possible approach route. Lisa had been studying the enemy positions for weeks. Sir, the system has multiple asteroid fields that could provide cover for our approach. The enemy fleet is positioned to defend the main hyperspace routes, but they might not expect an attack from an unusual direction. Major Susan Clark, the fleet's new tactical specialist, had joined the discussion. She was a former Zephyrian prisoner who had been tortured for resisting slave labor assignments. Her hatred of oppressive regimes burned even brighter than Jake's. Captain, I have been analyzing the enemy fleet composition. They have powerful battleships, but most of their ships are older designs with known weaknesses. If we can separate their fleet and attack smaller groups, we should be able to defeat them piece by piece. The plan was ambitious and dangerous. Jake would be taking 6 ships against a fleet 25 times larger. But he had advantages the enemy could not match. Superior weapons, better training, and crews who were fighting for something they believed in. All right, people, send the word to all ships. We jumped to Nexus Gate in 12 hours. This is our chance to break the back of galactic slavery once and for all. As the fleet prepared for battle, Jake stood on his bridge and thought about how far humanity had come. 6 months ago, they had been an unknown species on the edge of galactic civilization. Now they were leading a coalition of freed peoples against the largest slave empires in the galaxy. The enemy had numbers and experience, but Jake's fleet had something more important. They had justice on their side. And throughout human history, that had often been enough to win seemingly impossible victories. The Retribution and her escorts jumped into hyperspace, heading for the most important battle in galactic history. The outcome would determine whether freedom or tyranny ruled the stars. Behind them, on dozens of liberated worlds, millions of former slaves looked up at the night sky and prayed for the success of their human liberators. Security. Chief Tony Lewis had been working with resistance movements throughout both empires. His job was to coordinate uprisings that would happen when the main battle began. Timing would be critical. "Captain, I have confirmed contacts with rebel groups on 27 worlds," Tony reported. "They are ready to sabotage enemy communication, networks and supply lines when we give the signal." Jake was impressed by how quickly the resistance networks had grown. Word of humanity's victories had spread hope to enslaved populations that had given up on freedom long ago. Now they were ready to fight for themselves. What about enemy intelligence? Do they know we are coming? Ryan Brooks had been monitoring Krathian and Vel communications. "Sir, they know something is happening, but they do not know our exact plans. Their spy networks were designed to watch other alien species, not humans. We are still largely invisible to their intelligence services." That was another advantage of being new to galactic politics. The established powers had spent centuries learning to spy on each other, but they had no experience dealing with human methods of warfare, The Battle of Nexus Gate lasted 18 hours and changed the course of galactic history. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UE's Retribution, watching enemy ships explode on his tactical display. The human fleet was outnumbered, 25 to 1, but superior technology and determination were winning the day. "Captain, enemy battleship destroyer is breaking apart," reported Commander Lisa Parker. "That makes 8 enemy capital ships destroyed so far." The quantum disruptors had proven their worth once again. Even the largest Krathian and Vel battleships could not withstand weapons that ignored their shields completely. But the enemy was learning to adapt their tactics. "Sir, they are using smaller ships as suicide bombers," warned Communications Officer Ben Roberts. 3 enemy destroyers are on collision courses with our frigates." Captain Nina Walsh was commanding the FSS Liberation when the enemy destroyers attacked. Her ship's point defense systems destroyed 2 of the attacking vessels, but the third one got through. The explosion damaged her engines and knocked out half her weapons. "This is Nina," she reported over the fleet communication system. "Liberation is still fighting, but we have taken heavy damage. Requesting permission to withdraw for repairs." Jake made a quick decision. "Negative, Nina. We need every ship in the fight. Can you maintain position?" "Roger that, Captain." "We will hold the line." The Allied fleet was taking damage, but they were giving much more than they received. The FSS Freedom, crewed by former Zephyrian slaves, had destroyed 6 enemy cruisers with precise quantum disruptor fire. The human destroyer UES Justice was using its advanced sensors to coordinate attacks by the entire fleet. Admiral Kethvar commanded the combined Krathian and Vel fleet from his flagship, the massive battleship Domination. He was a veteran of dozens of campaigns and had never lost a major battle. But he had never faced weapons like the quantum disruptors. "Admiral, we have lost over 40 ships, his tactical officer reported. "The enemy weapons are cutting through our formations like they are made of paper." "How many enemy ships have we destroyed?" Kethvar asked. "None, sir. We have damaged several of their vessels, but we have not achieved a single confirmed kill." The Admiral stared at his tactical display in disbelief. His fleet had enough firepower to level continents, but they could not seem to hurt the small human force that was systematically destroying his ships. "All ships, concentrate fire on the enemy flagship," he ordered. "If we can destroy their command ship, the rest might retreat." 50 Krathian and Vel warships turned their weapons toward the UE's Retribution. Energy beams and missile salvos filled the space around the human flagship. The intensity of the attack was like standing in the center of a star. But the retributions. Advanced armor and shields absorbed the enemy fire. The ship shook under the bombardment, but its hull held together. Chief Engineer Amy Collins worked frantically to keep all systems operational under the massive assault. "Captain, we are taking heavy fire, but all primary systems are still online," she reported. "Our armor is performing better than expected. We can take this punishment for several more hours if necessary." Jake was proud of his ship and crew. The Retribution had been designed to fight against impossible odds, and it was living up to its reputation. "Lisa, target the enemy flagship. Let us show Admiral HFY what human justice looks like." The Retribution's main quantum disruptor arrays turned toward the massive battleship Domination. The alien vessel was 3 times larger than the human ship and carried enough weapons to destroy a small moon. But size meant nothing when the enemy could not defend against your weapons. 12 quantum disruptor beams reached out across space and struck the Domination's hull. The beams passed through the battleship's shields as if they were not there, and began tearing the massive vessel apart from the inside. Admiral HFY felt his flagship shake under the human attack. "Damage report," he shouted. "Sir, we have massive hull breaches on all decks. Main engines are offline. Weapon systems are failing across the ship," his damage control officer reported. "How is this possible? Our shields are still at full power." "Admiral, the enemy weapons seem to ignore our shields completely. They are hitting us directly through our defensive barriers." Major Susan Clark was leading a squadron of bombers in an attack on the enemy fleet supply ships. She was a former slave who had endured years of torture in Krathian prison camps. Now she was getting her revenge with interest. "Gold Squadron, target the fuel tankers," she ordered. "Let us see how well they fight when they run out of power." Her bombers swept through the enemy formation, destroying support vessels and communication ships. Without fuel and ammunition, even the largest battleships would become helpless. Colonel Frank Adams was preparing his Marines for boarding operations. Intelligence had identified several enemy ships that contained important prisoners and intelligence. Data. "Sir, sensors are detecting human life signs aboard the Krathian cruiser Oppression," he reported to Captain Morrison. "It might be prisoners from our merchant ships that were captured last year." Jake had heard about the missing merchant vessels. The Krathians had been attacking human trade ships and taking their crews prisoner for interrogation and forced labor. "Frank, take your team and rescue those prisoners, but be careful. The enemy might try to use them as hostages." The Marines launched from the Retribution in armored shuttles. Their powered armor made them nearly invulnerable to alien weapons, and there, plasma rifles could cut through starship hulls. Within an hour, they had boarded 3 enemy vessels and freed over 200 human prisoners. The tide of battle turned decisively when Security Chief Tony Lewis activated the resistance networks throughout Krathian and Vel space. On 27 different worlds, enslaved beings rose up against their masters. Communication networks failed, supply bases exploded, and government buildings burned. "Captain, we are receiving reports of successful uprisings on most enemy worlds," Tony reported. "The Krathian and Vel governments are losing control of their own territory." Admiral HFY received the same reports on his flagship. His empire was collapsing from within while his fleet was being destroyed in space. The situation was hopeless. "All ships, this is Admiral HFY," he broadcast to his remaining vessels. "I am ordering a general retreat. All ships that can still move should withdraw immediately." But Jake Morrison was not going to let the enemy escape to rebuild their forces. "All ships, pursue the retreating enemy. Do not let any of them reach their home systems." The pursuit lasted for 6 more hours. One by one, The surviving Krathian and Vel ships were hunted down and destroyed. Only a handful of the fastest vessels managed to escape into deep space. When the battle was over, the debris of 138 enemy warships floated in space around Nexus Gate. The largest slave fleet in galactic history had been completely destroyed by 6 ships crewed by humans and former slaves. Jake stood on his bridge and watched the tactical display clear of enemy contacts. Ben, send a message to all liberated worlds. Tell them the hegemony of Krath and the Syndicate of Vel no longer exist. Tell them they are free to govern themselves. Dr. Carl Thompson was treating wounded crew members in the medical bay. The battle had been costly for the Allied fleet, but they had achieved total victory. Captain, final casualty report shows 43 wounded, but no deaths among our crews. The enemy lost over 50,000 personnel. 6 months later, Captain Jake Morrison stood on an observation deck overlooking the construction of the first Galactic Freedom Academy. Former enemies were now working together to build a new kind of fleet, one dedicated to protecting the innocent rather than conquering the weak. The Academy was located on New Hope, a planet that had been a Krathian slave world just a year before. Now it was the headquarters of the Galactic Liberation Fleet, an organization that included ships and crews from dozens of different species. Ambassador Claire Davis had negotiated the formal treaties that established the new galactic order. The old council had been replaced by a federation where every species had an equal voice, regardless of their military power or economic influence. Captain, the first class of cadets will graduate next month, reported Commander Steve Martinez, who had been promoted to head the Academy's tactical training program. We have students from 37 different species, all learning human military doctrine and philosophy. Jake was proud of how far they had come. The galaxy was not perfect, but it was free. No longer could powerful empires enslave weaker peoples without fear of consequences. The Galactic Liberation Fleet patrolled the trade routes and responded to calls for help from any world threatened by tyranny. Captain Nina Walsh commanded one of the new patrol squadrons from her flagship, the FSS Hope. Her crews included humans and aliens working side by side to maintain the peace they had fought so hard to achieve. Jake, we have reports of pirates attacking merchant ships in the Outer Rim, she reported during their weekly conference call. Should we investigate? Absolutely. Pirates are just another form of tyranny. Show them what happens when they threaten innocent people. The pirates learned the same lesson that the Zephyrians, Krathians, and Vel had learned before them. Evil might be strong, but justice backed by superior firepower was stronger. 10 years later, Jake Morrison retired from active